30 years. 30 years I'd lived in this world. A character transplanted into a novel. Ethan Reed, the second male lead, the man I had married, suddenly wore a face I didn't recognize. When a sudden illness struck me down, he planned to send our daughter Lily to be a living blood bag for the heroine's child. I fought him tooth and nail, my body racked with fever, and for my defiance he locked me away. Not long after, as consciousness slipped in and out of the inferno of my sickness, Julian Croft, my childhood friend, rushed to my side. But he wasn't there to save Lily or me. He was there to force my signature onto a contract, transferring my shares to the heroine. In my final desperation, I turned to Leo Maxwell, the young man I had sponsored for years, treated like a younger brother. His price was a cruel transaction, all my viable organs to be harvested for the heroine's family. I always knew you were here to conquer us, he'd sneered, his voice dripping with a venom I'd never imagined. We tolerated you for so many years, Serafina. We were just waiting for the moment you'd finally be useful. I relented. I signed my name, my hand guided by a will that was no longer my own. And then the news came, a chilling whisper that shattered the remnants of my world. Lily had died from excessive blood loss. The resuscitation had failed. I looked at these men, these architects of my despair, their faces devoid of remorse, and the fight simply drained out of me. It didn't matter anymore. My mission here had failed. But in their hollow victory, they were about to lose everything. A chill had settled into my bones the previous night. By midnight my head was throbbing, a dull ache that promised a miserable day. When I finally awoke, the telltale signs of a cold were undeniable. My forehead felt unnervingly warm to the touch. My first thought was to ask Ethan to take our daughter Lily out for the day. I didn't want to risk infecting them. But the space beside me in bed was cold, empty. Ethan was already gone. Strange, he was usually a late riser. Then a faint sound drifted from the living room, Lily's distressed cries. Ignoring the wave of dizziness that washed over me, I scrambled out of bed. The sight that greeted me sent a shard of ice through my heart. Ethan, his face a grim, stony mask I'd never seen before, was packing a small bag, his grip tight on a struggling, sobbing Lily. He completely ignored her whimpers of pain. This cold, callous Ethan was a stranger. He had always doted on Lily, cherished her. Ethan, what are you doing? My voice was raspy. He glanced at me, and his brow furrowed in an automatic expression of displeasure. Lily immediately thrashed, her small voice pleading, Mommy, Mommy. Daddy wants to take me to the hospital for a shot. I don't want to go. I'm scared of needles. Ethan's face darkened further. You have to go. Isabel's son is waiting for your blood. His life depends on it. Don't be so selfish. Isabel? Isabel Vance, the novel's heroine. A name I hadn't heard in years. A name I thought had faded into the past. I had come to this world with a mission. My purpose was to support Ethan Reed, the sensitive, often frail second male lead. His health was precarious, and I became his unwavering guardian, managing every aspect of his life. When crippling medical bills threatened to overwhelm him, I paid them without a second thought. To ensure he could recuperate in peace, I found positions for his family, members within my own company. My days were a litany of reminders: medication, hydration, specially prepared nourishing meals. No detail was too small. If he was hospitalized, I'd rush from my classes, often skipping my own meals just to coax him to eat, then stay late to help him catch up on his studies. Everyone who knew me joked that Ethan had me completely wrapped around his little finger. That devoted rhythm continued until Isabel Vance appeared. Perhaps it was the inescapable destiny of a second male lead, but Ethan was inexplicably, irrevocably drawn to her. In those days, he began to treat me as if I were invisible. Isabel, for reasons I never understood, always seemed to believe I was targeting her, and her animosity slowly poisoned Ethan against me too. The breaking point was a Christmas party I'd planned for our entire class. I announced I'd booked a restaurant for a celebration, and excitement rippled through the room. But Isabel's eyes blazed with fury, as if I had deliberately insulted her. Did you know I worked there as a waitress? She accused, her voice trembling. Did you invite everyone just to laugh at me? I had no idea she worked there. But before I could even form a denial, Ethan, his face contorted with disgust, echoed her sentiment. Serafina, Hayes, is money all that matters to you? Do you think you're so superior looking down on poor people? All those medical bills you paid for me, was that just charity? A game to you, you rich heiress? You disgust me. Back then, Isabel was the pitiful orphan, taken in by distant relatives, while I was the privileged daughter of a wealthy family, accustomed to being admired. Ethan's venomous words struck me like a physical blow, leaching the color from my face. It was then I understood. Sometimes genuine affection can be utterly invisible to the one it's meant for. After that, he never showed me a shred of kindness, dismissing all my past efforts as the bored amusement of a spoiled young woman. Yet, I still worried about his fragile health, secretly arranging for his hospital fees to be paid. And when Isabel inevitably hurt him, as heroines in these stories often do to their secondary admirers, I was always the first one there to offer comfort. 5 years ago, Isabel had married the male lead and moved abroad. Ethan had drifted back into my orbit. I'd believed, foolishly, that my perseverance had finally paid off. We married, had Lily, and lived a life that felt blessedly ordinary. I thought Isabel Vance was finally a closed chapter in our story. I never imagined her name alone could still throw our lives into such devastating turmoil. As I stood there reeling from shock, Ethan finished packing. He grabbed Lily's arm, intending to drag her away. When she resisted, planting her small feet, he pulled harder, callously indifferent to whether he hurt her. Her shrill cries told me how much pain he was inflicting. I rushed forward to intervene, but Ethan shoved me aside with brutal force. Already weakened by the severe cold, I stumbled and crashed to the floor. As I tried to scramble up, dazed and disoriented, Ethan loomed over me. His hand shot out, fingers closing around my throat. His eyes filled with a chilling revulsion. If Isabel's son's surgery goes wrong because of your interference, Serafina, can you bear that responsibility? He hissed, his grip tightening. Do you remember everything you put Isabel through? I remember. I remember it all for you. She's back now. It's time you paid your dues. If you dare cause Isabel any more pain, I swear I will make you pay a price you can't imagine. Air. I couldn't breathe. My face flushed, my lungs burned. Finally, his hand released me. I collapsed, coughing, a raw, tearing pain in my chest. Lily, witnessing this terrifying scene, immediately stopped crying, her small face pale with fear. Mommy, are you okay? You rest, okay? I'll be fine, Mommy. I'll just go get a little shot, and then I'll be right back. My sweet, innocent daughter, completely unaware of the horror awaiting her, forced a brave little smile, trying to reassure me even as Ethan dragged her towards the door. Her last words a heartbreaking echo. I'll come back and tell you a story, Mommy. You'll get better soon. And I, sprawled helplessly on the floor, could only watch as Ethan took her away. No, something terrible will happen, I whispered before darkness finally claimed me. When I regained consciousness on the cold floor, my body was a confusing battleground of icy chills and burning heat. My throat was so raw that speech was nearly impossible. I touched my forehead, it was terrifyingly hot. My thoughts were muddled, reality wavering. Lily? Lily! I called out instinctively, my voice a broken croak. The silence that answered was a stark reminder. My sweet girl, who would usually come running at the first sound of my voice, was gone. Ethan had taken her to be a bloodbag for Isabel Vance's son. Ethan had no idea what he was truly doing. He would regret this. He would regret it with every fiber of his being. I had to save her. I staggered to the front door, only to find it locked. No matter how I twisted the knob or rattled the handle, it wouldn't budge. Desperation clawed at me. I was about to try smashing a window when the lock clicked and the door swung open. It was Julian Croft, my childhood companion. A wave of relief washed over me. I was saved. The strength I'd clung to evaporated, and I crumpled to the ground. The world swam before my eyes. Even Julian's figure was a blur. Julian! I gasped, my breath shallow. Quickly, take me to the hospital. Ethan, he took Lily to give blood to someone else. She's so little, Julian, they can't. It's dangerous. Something awful will happen. But Julian didn't move. He stood a few feet away, his expression chillingly impassive. A cold dread began to seep through my feverish haze. This wasn't right. Finally, he approached. In his hand was a document and a pen, which he thrust into my trembling fingers. My limbs were leaden. I couldn't grip it. He seized my hand, his fingers like steel bands, and began to force my signature onto the paper. As the first stroke of my surname, Hayes, took shape, I realized with dawning horror what he was doing. He was forging my signature on a contract I hadn't even seen. A surge of adrenaline, a final burst of defiance tightened my muscles. "What are you doing? Julian, what are you making me sign?" I cried out, yanking my hand away. The pen skittered across the page, leaving a long, ruinous streak. The next second, his hand cracked across my face. The sting was shocking. He still held the pen, and its sharp tip raked my cheek. I felt a warm trickle of blood. "You bitch!" he snarled, his face contorted with a rage I'd never seen. "How dare you resist? This is what you owe Isabel. This is your atonement. Sign it. Now, transfer all your company shares to her." I stared at him, incredulous. This was the boy who had trailed after me, calling me Sarah, his little sister. Now, he looked at me as if I were his mortal enemy. Julian Croft. After Ethan, he was the person I had cared for the most. We grew up together. When we were little, our families had jokingly suggested an arranged childhood betrothal. He'd earnestly played house with me every day, declaring he would be my groom. As we grew older, the teasing stopped, and he started calling me sister. But he remained my loyal shadow. Though he was born 3 days before me, he often acted with a childlike naivety, and it was usually me looking out for him. He was prone to blunders, and I patiently helped him fix his mistakes, often taking the blame for his misadventures. He'd once told me his dream was to be the CEO of a major company. I'd assembled a team for him, provided startup capital, helped him secure investors, and personally mentored him. Julian had been full of ambition then, vowing we'd ring the opening bell at the stock exchange together. But as the company found its footing, Isabel Vance appeared. She was an intern in her junior year of university, bright and captivating. Julian was utterly bewitched. He hung on her every word. But Isabel, though intelligent, was still a student, naive about the complex world of business and its delicate interpersonal dynamics. She inadvertently offended many important clients. I was the one who quietly smoothed things over behind the scenes. Isabel, believing her successes were all her own doing, once stormed into a partner company's office, only to be unceremoniously thrown out. She had then confronted me, her voice dripping with scorn. "Director Hayes, so much time has passed, and you still have that insufferably arrogant air about you. Is it so hard to be outshone by an employee that you resort to such dirty tricks? Stealing my credit, slandering me to our partners? Did you think I was still that same girl you could casually humiliate years ago?" Julian, already distant and entirely devoted to Isabel, overheard. He immediately assumed I had been bullying and suppressing Isabel from the start. He stepped protectively in front of her. "All this time," he'd said, his voice cold, "I was fooled by your act. So this is the kind of person you really are. You may have contributed to this company, Serafina, but I am the legal representative, the majority shareholder. She is my person. I will not allow you to bully Isabel Vance." After that, he barred me from the company, forbidding me from interfering in any of its affairs. But I couldn't just let it go. I placed trusted contacts within the company to secretly help him navigate obstacles. After Isabel left with the male lead, Julian and I had a chance encounter at a charity gala. We talked, and it felt like we had slowly mended our friendship, rekindling some of our childhood closeness. At least that's what I had believed. Now I lay on the floor, my clothes soaked with sweat. Every breath was a searing pain. Julian produced another, identical contract and approached again, grabbing my hand to force the signature. Remembering our past, I made one last appeal. "If I sign this, Julian, you won't be able to bear the consequences." He snorted. "Are you trying to scare me? I'm making you sign this today no matter what. Let's see what could possibly happen." He pressed my hand harder onto the paper. This time I had almost no strength left to resist. Even the slightest movement sent jolts of agony through my body. My voice was a desperate plea. "Julian, for the sake of all our years together, at least bring Lily back. Or take me to her. I'll sign the contract, I promise. I'll give the shares to Isabel. Just save Lily." Julian's movements finally stilled. A cruel, mocking smile twisted his lips. "Lily saving Isabel's son is her honor, Serafina. So way for you to atone. Do you really think you're in any position to bargain with me?" He forced my hand to scrawl my name. Satisfied, he prepared to leave. I clung to consciousness, trying to grab his leg. "Save my daughter. She'll die, they'll all die." He didn't even glance back, simply stepping over me as he strode out. Just as I was about to succumb to the darkness again, the image of Lily waiting for me at the hospital jolted me back to a fragile awareness. My body shivered uncontrollably, yet I felt as if I were trapped in a furnace. This tormenting cycle of cold and heat made it impossible to stand. Inch by painful inch, I crawled across the floor back to the bedroom. My fingers fumbled for my phone. With trembling hands, I dialed Leo Maxwell, my assistant, the boy I'd helped for so long. Leo, quickly, go to the hospital, save Lily. Ethan took her for a blood transfusion. Whatever Leo said in response was lost in the roaring in my ears. The words out, I lost consciousness again. I don't know how much time passed. I awoke with a start, finding myself lying on my bed. A fleeting sense of relief washed over me. Leo must have come. He must have helped me. Cough, cough, cough. I tried to sit up, but the movement triggered a violent coughing fit, each cough feeling like my chest was being torn apart. Ma'am, you're awake. Leo's voice came from the doorway. He entered holding a glass of water. Seeing him, I forgot my own suffering. Lily. I gasped. Did you bring Lily back? Is she okay? Please let me see her. His face retained its usual polite smile, but his words were like shards of ice. Lily is still at the hospital, ma'am. She's giving blood to Isabel's son. She can't come back yet. A chilling dread enveloped me. The next second, anger erupted. I told you to bring Lily back. I shrieked. Why didn't you bring her back? You have to, quick. Before I could finish, a splash of cold water hit my face, shocking me into silence. Droplets ran down my cheeks and onto my clothes. I stared at him, stunned. Leo stood there holding the empty glass, a demonic smile playing on his lips. Awake now, are we? Ma'am, you don't seem to understand the situation. Lily is donating blood to save Isabel's son. If she doesn't save him, then you will have to. What do you mean? He continued, his voice smooth and cruel. A blood transfusion is only a temporary fix. Isabel's son needs a kidney transplant. If you want to save your daughter, you'll trade your kidney for her. He paused, a thoughtful, predatory glint in his eyes. No, that's not enough. Isabel mentioned to me. Her uncle's liver isn't doing well either. It wouldn't be too much for you to part with a piece of yours, would it? His smile widened. And your bone marrow. Donate that. too. Consider it a good deed, accumulating merit for your daughter. You always did play the part of the devoted mother, didn't you? Surely you wouldn't begrudge a few organs. Leo looked at me as if I were nothing more than a collection of spare parts, an emotionless organ bank. He seemed eager to carve me up and offer every piece of my flesh and blood to Isabel Vance. I stared at this stranger, this Leo Maxwell I had apparently never truly known. I'd met him in junior high. His family had thrown him out, and he'd come to the city to earn money. But what could a child that young earn? He couldn't even afford food. I'd found him filthy and desperate, rummaging through trash cans. My heart had ached for him. I sponsored him. From junior high all the way through university. After graduation, Leo found me, insisting he wanted to stay by my side, to repay my kindness. I initially refused, but he was persistent. So I made him my assistant. For years he had been diligent, capable, and loyal. I had even complained to him about Isabel, never suspecting he had any connection to her. Now I knew. He was deeply, obsessively devoted to the heroine. He was like a venomous snake, lurking in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. An involuntary shiver ran through me. Leo's smile was unwavering. Ethan, Julian, and me. We were all your conquest targets. Weren't we, Serafina? We've known all along you were here to manipulate us. We've tolerated you for so many years. Now finally, it's time for you to be useful. With every word he spoke, my eyes widened further in disbelief and horror. When he finished, I could only stare at him, terrified. He offered me a brutal, triumphant grin. Surprised, aren't you? The truth is, Isabel and I are from the same village. We grew up together. You bullied her for so many years, Serafina Hayes. This is what you owe her. My body trembled violently, but the thought of Lily, alone and terrified in that hospital, forced a sliver of icy calm into my mind. What do you really want? I whispered. Sign this voluntary organ donation consent form. From now on, all your organs belong to Isabel. If she needs them, you provide them. Even if it's your heart. Leo, who had always seemed so harmless, so kind, was revealing himself to be the most ruthless of them all. I knew I didn't have time to delay. Gritting my teeth, I said, "I can sign. But you must not touch Lily. You have to guarantee my daughter's safety. Don't test my patience. Sign it. Now. Take me to the hospital first. I need to see Lily safe before I sign." I held my ground. Leo sneered. "You sign and then I'll take you." He casually tossed the contract onto the bed, as if preparing for a long standoff. But Lily couldn't wait. I didn't know what those madmen would do to her. My resolve crumbled. I had to sign. "Then let's go," he said, carefully retrieving the contract. He didn't offer any assistance, didn't seem to care that I was burning with fever and barely able to stand. He simply turned and walked out. I drained the last dregs of my willpower to follow. During the journey, my heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of impending doom. The sense of unease intensified with every passing moment. When we finally arrived at the hospital, I stumbled along the corridor, my steps unsteady, towards what I assumed was Lily's room. But Leo led me to the waiting area outside an operating theater. Ethan, Julian, and Isabel were already there, Isabel flanked protectively by the two men. When they saw me, Ethan and Julian merely shot me cold, dismissive glances. I ignored their disdain, my only concern for my daughter. "Lily," I choked out. "Where is Lily?" Isabel looked at me with an expression of feigned apology. "My son Daniel had a sudden complication and needed emergency surgery and a blood transfusion. Your daughter was taken in with him. They should be out soon. She's just a child. How could you?" My voice rose in a furious shriek, and I lunged towards Isabel. The three men instantly moved to shield her. Ethan, his face a mask of rage, kicked me viciously in the shin. "Don't you dare touch Isabel." My leg, already weak, buckled. I nearly flew backwards from the force of the blow. Agony shot through my entire body, but I gritted my teeth trying to push myself up. "Give me back my daughter," I screamed. Suddenly, the operating room doors swung open. A doctor emerged, his expression grave. My heart clenched. "Daniel Vance's surgery had unexpected complications," the doctor began. "He required significantly more blood than anticipated. Fortunately, the surgery was ultimately successful. However," at the news of Daniel's successful surgery, relief and joy illuminated the faces of Isabel, Ethan, and Julian. "That's wonderful. Daniel's okay." But I had latched onto that single ominous word. However, my breathing became rapid, shallow. I stared at the doctor, my gaze unwavering. "However what? What about my daughter?" The doctor sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "However, the little girl, she lost too much blood. Resuscitation efforts were unsuccessful. I'm so sorry she didn't make it." The world tilted. A deafening roar filled my ears. Everything spun, light and shadow merging into a chaotic vortex. "Heh!" I sank to the floor, and then a wild, hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. "It's over. It's all over. The mission has failed. You're all finished." They stood there, frowning, watching my descent into apparent madness. Then, a gurney was wheeled out of the operating room. They swarmed towards it, cooing over Daniel Vance. Ethan was among them. Lily's small, still form, covered by a white sheet, was wheeled past him. He didn't even glance at her. Ding, restrictions lifted. The fever that had ravaged my body began to recede. The system was fully active. I stood up, my movements steady, and looked down at Lily. The white sheet lay draped over her tiny frame. The little girl who would sweetly call me mommy, who would dance for me, tell me stories and fill my life with joy, was gone from this world. I stepped forward and gently stroked her cheek, as if to comfort her. "It's all right, little one. Everyone who hurt you will pay the price." Ethan, as if sensing something, turned his head and looked at me. Our eyes met. In the cold, emotionless depths of my gaze, he saw something that made his body tremble, as if all his strength had suddenly abandoned him. He staggered and fell to the ground. A full medical examination confirmed the diagnosis. Ethan Reed had late-stage stomach cancer. An optimistic prognosis gave him 3 months to live. I merely smirked inwardly. My judgment was far stricter, 1 month at most. Isabel, her brow furrowed in disbelief, questioned the doctor. "How is that possible? Could it be a misdiagnosis? He's always been so healthy. He was sick a lot in high school, but he told me he made a full recovery 4 years ago. He hasn't been ill since." and he had no symptoms. How could it suddenly be late stage? The doctor explained patiently. Typically, late-stage stomach cancer presents with upper abdominal pain. However, in cases like his, where the tumor hasn't invaded highly sensitive areas, it's possible to be asymptomatic until the very end. We've conducted thorough examinations. The chance of misdiagnosis is slim. If you're still concerned, you can seek a second opinion at another hospital. The doctor, clearly experienced with distressed patients and their families, remained confident in his diagnosis. Their faces fell as they absorbed the doctor's calm certainty. Ethan stared blankly into the distance, muttering, "How can this be? It's impossible. Why is this happening to me? I don't want to die." I watched him, a scornful curl to my lips. Faced with his own mortality, he finally knew fear. But what about my Lily? She was only 4. Was she terrified when those needles pierced her skin? Did she cry out for her mommy and daddy when they wheeled her into that cold operating room? Did she suffer in her final moments? It was her own father who had pushed her into that abyss. Thinking this, I felt a cold satisfaction. Ethan shouldn't die so easily. He deserved to be tormented 1,000 times over. Ethan's gaze suddenly flickered towards me, hesitant. Then he visibly flinched, shrinking back in fear. I smiled. Leo Maxwell, ever opportunistic, suddenly asked, "Can stomach cancer be treated with a transplant?" His eyes darted pointedly towards me, or rather towards the organs within my body. I leaned nonchalantly against the door frame. But the doctor delivered a firm negative. Stomach cancer cannot be treated with a transplant. And at this late stage, organ transplantation is no longer a viable option for any condition he might have. Leo looked disappointed. It wasn't that he genuinely wanted to save Ethan. He merely wanted another way to torture me. But the tables, I mused, were already turning. After the doctor left, Isabel sat beside Ethan, offering soft words of comfort. In the past, Ethan would have lapped up her attention. But now, teetering on the brink of death, he was starting to unravel. Isabel's platitudes were shallow, empty. "It's all right, Ethan. You'll get better. Many cancer patients are given only a few months, but they live for years, even decades. Daniel and I can't bear to lose you. You have to fight. You're so strong. I believe you can do it." She offered no concrete support, no promise to stay by his side, only empty exhortations to be strong. "Strong, strong, strong," Ethan muttered, then snapped, a flicker of his old petulance surfacing. "Why don't you get sick and try being strong then?" The words hung in the air. Isabel's face instantly darkened. Ethan seemed to regret his outburst, but, perhaps feeling the prerogative of a dying man, he stubbornly maintained his scowl. I had once indulged such behavior. But these people were not me. Leo immediately jumped to Isabel's defense. "How can you speak to Isabel like that? So what if you're sick? You have no right to talk to her that way, even if you were dying." Ethan retorted, "Are you her dog? This is between Isabel and me. What business is it of yours?" The two began to bicker. Isabel, her patience clearly exhausted, stood up, ready to leave. Julian, who had remained silent during the argument, seized the opportunity to sidle up to her, draping an arm around her shoulder, murmuring words of comfort. Isabel's expression softened slightly. "Well, Ethan, you get some rest. We're going to check on Daniel," she said, and Leo, ever attentive, immediately followed her out. Soon, only Ethan and I remained in the room. He looked at me and after a moment of silence commanded, "I want some water." "Ethan," I said, my voice calm and devoid of emotion, "let's get a divorce." Ethan's eyes widened, his expression one of utter disbelief. He frowned, as if trying to determine if he'd heard me correctly. Then a flicker of his old arrogance returned. "Impossible," he said confidently. "You'd never be able to leave me." I simply looked at him, my gaze steady, until doubt began to creep into his eyes. Suddenly he blurted out, "Who are you? You're not Serafina. My Serafina would never divorce me." He nodded sharply, as if confirming his own certainty. He was that confident that the real Serafina Hayes would never abandon him. I couldn't tell if he had finally developed a sliver of insight, or if he was simply too profoundly selfish to accept reality. For years. It had taken him 4 years to realize the person by his side had changed. Just as I was about to speak, Julian burst into the room, his face flushed with panic. "Serafina, the company's in trouble." The cash flow has suddenly dried up. Is this your doing? He thrust his phone at me. Multiple suppliers were simultaneously demanding payment, threatening to halt production for the next quarter if they weren't paid. Meanwhile, their clients were also demanding delivery of goods before they would release payment. One major contract had a deadline in 3 days. If they failed to deliver, Julian's company would face crippling breach of contract penalties. Julian glared at me, his voice laced with venom. You resent me for transferring your shares to Isabel, so you decided to destroy the company, is that it? You're heartless. I smiled, a light, almost airy expression. This was all set in motion the moment you forced me to sign that transfer agreement, Julian. I didn't need to do a thing. He insisted. You're the one pulling strings behind the scenes. I let him rant. He was, after all, a man at the end of his rope. His phone began to ring, the sound like a harbinger of doom. Fearing it was another creditor or a client demanding goods, he threw the phone across the room. But the ringing persisted, a relentless, mocking summons. Julian's eyes instinctively darted towards me, a familiar look of appeal. I had seen that look countless times before, and each time, I had stepped in and resolved his problems without a word. This time, however, I ignored him. I turned and walked out of the hospital room. Behind me, I heard a choked, desperate cry, familiar yet alien. Serafina. Just one word, then silence. This time, no one would help him, just as he had refused to help Lily. As I waited for the elevator in the hallway, Leo Maxwell appeared, stubbornly blocking my path. You have to stay. You signed the organ donation papers. You need to donate a kidney to Daniel first. His voice was cold, devoid of warmth. His surgery went well, but Isabel is still very worried. Daniel needs to live a long, healthy life. So, your kidney is essential for him. Only then will Isabel truly be at ease. He spoke as if I were livestock marked for slaughter, not a living, breathing human being. Daniel needed to live a healthy life. And my daughter? In his eyes, was my daughter's life merely a necessary sacrifice for Isabel Vance's child? But the world I knew did not work that way. I shook my head slowly. Leo, have I ever mistreated you? His eyes flickered for a moment. Then he lifted his chin defiantly. But you bullied Isabel. That's unforgivable. I pointed to the simple chain around his neck. I gave that to you when we first met. Hearing this, Leo recoiled as if stung. He tore the necklace off and threw it at me contemptuously. You think I care about this? It's not even valuable. I smiled, rubbing the small metallic pendant between my fingers. It was true it wasn't worth much in monetary terms. But for Leo Maxwell it had been worth a life. A life that, while not one of extravagant wealth, would have been one of peace and modest prosperity. I wouldn't tell him what he was truly about to face. He would see it with his own eyes soon enough. Good luck, I said, my smile unwavering. Leo stared at me, uncomprehending. I casually tossed the necklace into a nearby trash can. The elevator doors opened. Inside stood nearly a dozen rough-looking, middle-aged men, their faces weathered, their hands calloused, men who clearly spent their lives toiling the earth. Leo's face instantly contorted in terror. And the men in the elevator shouted his real rural name. Well, if it isn't Shweta Hang. Hiding out here in the city, are we? We've been looking for you for a long time, boy. Just wait till we teach you a lesson. Before Leo could react, before he could even attempt to flee, one of the men swung a heavy stick, striking him hard across the legs. He cried out in pain, instinctively reaching for me. Serafina, help me. I had already stepped aside, a detached spectator to the unfolding drama. Leo, his face pale with fear, stretched a desperate hand towards me. The men's eyes followed his gesture, landing on me. I simply waved a dismissive hand. I don't know him. Hearing this, the men grew even angrier. We're your cousins, Dahang. Got a taste of city life and now you're too good for your own kin, are you? Wearing fancy clothes and pretending you don't know us? Begging a stranger for help? Who fed you when you were a child, huh? Do you even remember why they called you Big Yellow? Because you had no food, you fought with the dogs for scraps. One of them roared. Today we're going to give you a proper reminder. The elevator door slid shut, trapping Leo inside with his furious relatives, his screams echoing briefly before being cut off. A smile far more cruel than any Leo had shown me spread across my face. Everyone who had hurt Lily would pay. Come Leo, I thought. Have a taste of hell yourself. Within 3 days, Julian Croft's company teetered on the brink of bankruptcy, its collapse imminent. My informant told me Julian had spent these days desperately seeking help, knocking on countless doors, only to be turned away by everyone. The frantic, incessant calls I received from him confirmed he was out of options. He was trying to crawl back to me, his last resort. But it was too late. Impossible. I didn't answer his calls. So, he resorted to ambushing me at Ethan's hospital room. You can't possibly abandon your husband. I know how much you love him. His text message flashed on my screen. I glanced at the divorce papers already prepared. Just wait, I thought. It's only a matter of a few more days. When I failed to appear, Julian, in his desperation, somehow managed to find another lifeline. Chun Corporation announced it would inject capital into his failing company. I heard Julian had made significant concessions, returning home that morning with tears of relief streaming down his face. Don't think you're so indispensable. The world keeps turning without you, Serafina. He could still muster such arrogance. His spirits seemed remarkably high. I finally left my seclusion, because I knew Julian Croft would soon have no time to bother me. Less than a day later, the lifeline Julian had fought so hard to secure snapped. Chun Corporation was hit by a massive scandal and became the subject of an immediate official investigation. Not only was Julian's company doomed, but he himself was branded a jinx, a harbinger of misfortune. No one dared associate with him. He was utterly, completely finished. In the hospital room, I watched the news report with quiet satisfaction. Ethan, however, looked pale and drawn as he stared at the divorce agreement I'd presented him. Yet, he met my gaze with the same stubborn defiance as before. You're not Serafina. She would never treat me like this. And you have no right to treat me this way. Perhaps he was right. The real Serafina Hayes truly couldn't have brought herself to hurt him. She would have willingly sacrificed her own life for his health, his happiness, his everything. I looked at Ethan's wounded, aggrieved expression and found it almost laughable. But Ethan, I thought, didn't you disdain such devotion? It was true. I was not Serafina Hayes. I had only ever been playing her part. The truth was, for years ago, Ethan had already been diagnosed with late-stage stomach cancer. Serafina Hayes, the original one, was a transmigrator, a foolish, hopelessly devoted strategist. She had fallen deeply in love with Ethan. She wanted to use all her accumulated system points to restore his health and ensure the safe birth of their daughter. But such a profound intervention required an additional, devastating price. The price was her own existence. She would vanish. Before she disappeared, she begged me, her system, to take care of the people she cherished in this world. How ironic. They were merely her designated targets. Yet she spoke of them with such genuine affection. She cared for Ethan, who neglected his health when ill. She cared for Julian, the sahuhu blunder-prone boy who never quite grew up. She cared for Leo, the lonely, uprooted young man with no one to rely on. And most of all, she cared for the daughter she would never see. Born, never raise herself, Lily. She implored me to protect Lily, expressing her unwavering faith in my ability to do so, because I, after all, was her system. After Serafina vanished, I, in accordance with our agreement, sealed away all my advanced functions. I inherited all her emotions, her memories, and continued to live in this world as Serafina Hayes, carrying on her mission. They believed I was the strategist, but that was the real Serafina. No, even the real Serafina had never truly treated them as mere targets to be conquered. The necklace Serafina gave Leo was a protective charm, a talisman of good fortune. It was meant to shield him from his predetermined tragic fate. Julian in reality possessed no innate business acumen or luck. Serafina had bound her own considerable fortune and luck to his company. As long as she was connected to it, the company would thrive. And Ethan, when his cancer was first diagnosed, Serafina was pregnant. The overwhelming grief and stress took a toll on her body. She was in danger of losing the child. Faced with the devastating prospect of losing both her husband and her baby, she couldn't bear it. Serafina Hayes made the ultimate sacrifice, giving everything she had to save them both. From that moment, Ethan's health became intrinsically linked to Lily's life force. But Ethan, with his own hands, had extinguished his daughter Lily's life. And in doing so, he had also extinguished his own. My mission was to protect them. I had failed. Their destinies would now revert to their original tragic trajectories. Leo would never escape the poverty and hardship of his rural upbringing. Julian would live a life of destitution and failure. And Ethan would suffer the agonizing torment of his illness until his inevitable, lonely death. And all of this they had chosen with their own hands. For them I felt no pity. My only sorrow was for Lily. I had failed to protect her. The others, they simply got what they deserved. Ethan was still persistently questioning me. Where did the real Serafina go? Who are you? Can you bring my Serafina back to me? His voice, initially demanding, gradually softened as memories of Serafina's past kindness seemed to flood his mind. He began to choke up and finally he broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. I offered no answer, merely watching him with cold detachment. With the mission failed, all the emotions that had once belonged to Serafina Hayes were slowly dissipating from my being. A system has no feelings. In my eyes he was now just a troublesome NPC. 24 hours. That's all the time I had left before I, too, would disappear from this world. There would be no more Serafina Hayes. Sign it, I said, my voice flat. Lily is gone. It's all over. His tears stopped. He looked at me, his eyes dazed. Lily, is she really gone? You're the strategist, aren't you? Don't you have a way to bring her back? His voice was a desperate whisper. I thought you could. Weren't you just not reviving Lily to punish me, to make me angry? A wild, desperate hope flickered in his eyes. Bring Lily back. We can be a family again, the three of us. We can start over. Please. He lunged forward, grabbing my hand, his grip surprisingly strong. I don't want to die, he pleaded, his body trembling. Save me. Bring Lily back and restore my health. We can go back to how things were. You love me, Serafina, you know you do. You wouldn't want me to die, would you? Lily wouldn't want her daddy to die either. Please save me. He was rambling, his grip on reality clearly tenuous, repeating himself over and over. But I saw through his act. Sign the papers, Ethan. Stop evading. His trembling ceased for a moment. Then he let out a pitiful cry. Why are you doing this to me? I know I was wrong. I can change, I promise. I didn't believe a word. A man's vows, especially his, were the cheapest currency. As if on cue, the door opened and Isabel Vance walked in, holding the organ donation consent form I had once signed. She spoke in her typically soft, demure voice. I don't mean to interrupt. It's just, Serafina promised to donate her organs. My son's kidney transplant needs to be scheduled soon. And my second uncle's son also needs a kidney. It's perfect, really. 2 kidneys, 1 for each. The surgeries can even be arranged together. Very convenient. She had already allocated both my kidneys without a second thought. The Ethan of before would have eagerly pressured me to agree. But now something seemed to have shifted within him. He asked, his voice surprisingly firm. If both her kidneys are gone, what will happen to Serafina? Isabel looked taken aback, clearly not expecting such a question. She won't die, will she? She stammered, nudging Ethan with her elbow, urging him to play along. But Ethan shook his head. No. Of course she'll die without her kidneys. If it's no big deal to lose a kidney, why don't you donate one? Isabel's face flushed, then paled. Without her usual champions to fight her battles, she was at a loss for words. She must have been sorely missing Julian and Leo right then. Leo was currently preoccupied with his own dire situation. And Julian? He had just sent me another text message. Even if the company goes bankrupt, I can still make a lot of money in other ways. He still hadn't faced reality. He wouldn't. His luck had run out. Ethan's expression remained dazed, lost in his own thoughts. Isabel, sensing the shift in dynamics, didn't press the issue further. But then unexpectedly Ethan reached out, snatched the organ donation form from Isabel's hand, and tore it into pieces. Are you crazy? Isabel shrieked. If you tear that up, what about my son? Ethan, however, seemed utterly indifferent. Isn't my daughter's life enough for your son? Isabel was speechless. She huffed in frustration and stormed out of the room. After she left, Ethan looked at me, an expression of hopeful expectation on his face, as if seeking praise. But my expression remained cold, unmoved. Ethan's face fell, a look of profound sorrow replacing his fleeting hope. You're not her, he whispered. Nothing can ever go back. He picked up the divorce agreement and with a trembling hand signed his name. I looked at the signature, a sense of finality settling over me. From now on, I announced, Lily is my child alone. Her name will be Lily Hayes. She was Serafina Hayes's daughter. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it again. In that moment he seemed to finally grasp a sliver of self-awareness. And I began to prepare for my own departure. I found a funeral home and explained the specific, somewhat unconventional arrangements I required for the burial. They were hesitant at first, but a significant amount of money eventually persuaded them. During my final 24 hours, I did nothing but stay by Lily's side. I meticulously reviewed and selected every item for her burial, ensuring everything was perfect. In the last hour I lay down in the coffin. It was custom-made, generously sized, spacious. Large enough for two. Comfortable for both of us. Inside the coffin lay Lily Hayes, and beside her Serafina Hayes. Lily would have me with her on her journey to the underworld. She wouldn't be afraid. Serafina, I thought, although I failed to protect your daughter, I can accompany her on this final journey. You would be happy to know that, wouldn't you? The final minute. I closed my eyes. While Serafina Hayes was busy orchestrating her own demise, Ethan Reed, Julian Croft, and Leo Maxwell were frantically searching for her. Leo had managed to escape from the relatives who had been watching over him in his village. He realized his string of misfortunes had begun the moment he turned against Serafina. Only Serafina could save him now. That was his desperate conviction. He even scrabbled through the hospital trash cans, hoping to find the discarded necklace, but it was long gone. Julian, trapped in his own dead end, had reached the same conclusion. Normally, a company bankruptcy wouldn't saddle him with personal debt, but an investigation had suddenly unearthed evidence of his abuse of power and embezzlement of company funds, all for Isabel Vance. He was now burdened with a debt of $50 million, and that day, no matter where he went or what he did, he lost money. The $50 million snowballed, doubling to $100 million in a single day. Julian was on the verge of madness. He couldn't understand how things had gone so catastrophically wrong. But at this point he didn't know who else to turn to but Serafina. Perhaps only Serafina could help him. Ethan too was consumed by the need to find Serafina, the real Serafina. The pain of his illness was relentless, torturous. Every bone, every muscle screamed in agony. He wanted to end it all, to smash his head against a wall. But a final stubborn obsession kept him going. He had to know what had happened to his Serafina. He escaped from the hospital. He ran into Julian and Leo, who were also desperately searching. Their search was frantic, wide-ranging. But by the time they finally found Serafina, the funeral was already underway. They saw the photograph displayed at the service. Serafina and Lily, nestled together. This wasn't just Lily's funeral. Was Serafina going to be buried alive? Was this a sacrificial entombment? The horrifying thought seared through their minds. They raced towards the coffin. Or, at least, let us see her one last time. But by the time they reached the site, the coffin had already been lowered into the grave and was being covered with earth. Ethan grabbed a groundskeeper's arm, his voice hoarse with panic. Who is in that coffin? The groundskeeper, still moved by the poignant scene he had just witnessed, took a moment to compose himself. A mother with her daughter, he said, his voice thick with emotion. It was so touching. But Serafina isn't dead. She's alive. Serafina. The three men, driven mad with a desperate, dawning terror, snatched shovels from the workers and began to dig frantically, tearing at the freshly turned earth. The coffin was soon exposed again. They pried it open. Serafina Hayes and Lily Hayes lay side by side, nestled together as if in peaceful slumber. Ethan, trembling, reached out to check Serafina's breath. Nothing. Her skin was cold to the touch. Serafina Hayes was dead. In that moment the three men understood. Everything was irretrievable. Their lives were now irrevocably set on a path to a desolate abyss. An abyss they had dug with their own hands. The system awoke in the main God space. As it was preparing to stretch its programmatic limbs, a soft, small voice piped up. System sister, can I really see mommy? The little voice was full of innocent hope. Is this heaven? The system, now in its true form, found itself uncharacteristically awkward dealing with a child. A pang of guilt, a remnant of its time as Serafina, pricked at its core when it looked at Lily. It resorted to the universal panacea. Food. Lily obediently held the small cake the system materialized, her eyes blinking, but she didn't rush to eat it. I'll wait and eat with System Sister and Mommy, she said sweetly. The system felt itself being infiltrated by a virus known as utterly melted by cuteness. It accelerated its debugging and recalibration processes. Finally, just as Lily was drifting off to sleep, the process completed. A familiar voice laced with confusion echoed in the space. System? How did I get back here? Serafina Hayes materialized, looking around in bewilderment. And then a small joyful blur launched itself at her. Mommy! Mommy's back! Serafina stared in disbelief. She swept Lily into a tight embrace, tears instantly welling in her eyes. She quickly understood that the system, and perhaps the main God, had intervened, made some kind of cosmic bargain. Words failed her, her throat thick with emotion. Finally she managed a choked, heartfelt, "Thank you, system." The system felt a strange sort of programmatic blush. Just do your missions properly next time. And don't be so foolishly self-sacrificing with your points. It added with a touch of self-deprecation. Though I can't talk. I wasn't very smart myself. It had, in a moment of uncharacteristic impulsiveness, used all its previously accumulated rewards to resurrect Serafina Hayes and her daughter Lily. Lily tugged excitedly at Serafina's sleeve. Mommy. What are we going to do next? Next? Ah yes. A new life was about to begin.